There we are.
Perfect. Here we go. It's time for Clubhouse Chatter. Here's Norm Ordez.
All right, that's right. We're back for another go-round here on a beautiful Sunday morning here in the Eola Hills outside Amity, Oregon. And our first guest this morning is author Greg Prince. And today's opening day for 6 teams, and today is opening day for his New York Mets. He has been a Mets fan since, 1969, since you were 6?
That's the year.
And exciting day, I kind of wish Brian and I were talking about, growing up and having opening day as opening day. And of course, you have 6 teams playing today, then you got the rest of them playing tomorrow. Back in the day, the Cincinnati Reds were always the first team that played. They always got the home game, and they always opened up the season. I kind of wish it went back to that.
Yeah, you could kind of set your watch by it. I like that, even though the rest of us generally had to wait one extra day. You had the opener in Cincinnati. I think you, for a long time, had the opener in Detroit as well on the American League side.
Right.
And before that, the Washington Senators had that honor. It's one of those things that it's a great tradition, and once it sort of goes by the wayside, there's really nothing wrong with the fact that there's multiple games on Sunday and then Monday that everybody else gets going. But just because you got used to it and it just had a great feel to it, you sort of miss it. But at least for me and fans of 5 other teams, we don't have to wait too much longer.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. So you're a writer, a consultant, and you've written a handful of books, and you're a big New York Mets fan.
Yeah, you mentioned 1969 before. That's sort of my origin story. I'm a kid in New York, on Long Island specifically, sort of encountering the Amazin Mets for the first time, reading the back page of the New York Post in those days, which my father would bring home from work, and the back page had a sports cartoon, which is something you don't really see, speaking of traditions that have gone by the wayside. And this one every day seemed to feature a bear and a duck, and I learned that the bear was the first place Chicago Cubs, and the duck our lovable local New York Mets, who were fighting to move up from second place. And that's sort of where I came in, following the duck and the bear and looking at the standings and being fascinated by the numbers and kind of putting it all together at that age and deciding that this was a really great thing to be following. And as it happened, the Mets would surpass the Cubs that September and go on to win the Eastern Division and then the pennant, then the World Series. And I was hooked for life. There were not too many years like that followed, unfortunately. But once I was hooked, I was hooked. So a Mets fan from that moment forward. Good years, less good years. And as far as the writing is concerned, my career has been in journalism of various stripes, but the baseball writing basically came along with the advent of the internet. First through an America Online board that was devoted to the Mets, and then in the habit of writing sometimes lengthy emails to friends about the Mets. And one friend in particular, Jason Fry, and I kind of put that together as a blog in 2005 called Faith and Fear in Flushing, which is sort of the platform from which these books have sprung. And, tonight we start our 12th season of blogging the Mets at the site that we call, the blog for Mets fans who like to read, partly because we like to write, sometimes at length, but sometimes with brevity. And we've always loved to read about baseball, and we hope to bring that feeling to those who visit us.
So growing up, did you have a favorite player, or maybe you had multiple favorite players?
From the start, my favorite player was Tom Seaver. And once you've picked a favorite at the age of 6 and had to reinforce at the age of 7, I don't think you ever go back.
That is true. Yes.
Tom Seaver was my favorite baseball player then. He's my favorite baseball player now. And, if we ever have a Met who is greater than Tom Seaver, then that will be one of the greatest players of all time because, I was fortunate enough to grow up watching a pitcher who was on his way to the Hall of Fame on the first ballot with, until this year, the highest percentage of votes any Hall of Famer had garnered. So, Seaver kind of set the standard. It also kind of spoils you when you start looking at other pitchers, although, we have a lot of good pitchers to look at right now.
Yes, they do. And 2016 Mets are loaded. You got Harvey going tonight. You got Syndergaard going on Tuesday. Plus, you got Matz and DeGrom and, I'm a big Bartolo Colon fan, and that stems from 2006 when I was working with the Arizona Diamondbacks in Lancaster, California. He rehabbed in Rancho Cucamonga and pitched against us, and he no-hit us for 5 innings. And watching Bartolo was amazing. We had a young fireballer who could touch 95, 96, but Bartolo was just, command, and you could definitely tell why he was a major league pitcher because he was able to command, everything he had in his arsenal. And he made our guys, minor league guys just look silly.
Yeah, but Bartolo Colon is an ageless wonder, and I think we've all learned going on 3 seasons of him in New York with the Mets that it's easy to get sucked in by the novelty of him, his shape, shall we say, and his age, and there's the air of mystery that's around him a little bit because he doesn't give many interviews, and what interviews he gives are usually through an interpreter. But the man can pitch, and he has proven that for about 20 years now. And each of the Met pitchers, the highly regarded fireballers and so forth, all swear by him and all say that they've learned so much from him. So it's easy to focus on Harvey and DeGrom and Syndergaard and Steven Matz and later on Zach Wheeler, we hope. But Colon is a treat to watch at all facets of the game, and I'm glad the Mets have held on to him.
He's really a heck of an athlete. You look at his size and man, he is an athletic. He's a marvel, really. He could do a lot of different things, and people don't realize that. It's kind of like Pablo. I know Pablo's got his weight issues up there in Boston and everything, but I don't know if Pablo is the athlete that Bartolo is or whatever. But man, I'm excited. I grew up an Atlanta Braves fan, so I grew up in Idaho. I grew up an Atlanta Braves fan, so I hated the Mets growing up, and it wasn't until it's probably been within the last 5 years. The older I get, the more of a baseball fan I become, and the less of a fan of a team I become. I still follow my Giants because I work for the Giants and the Diamondbacks or whatever, but I just love baseball. There's the Mets. I love what the Mets are doing. They've got Oregon State product Michael Conforto on the team. They've got this pitching staff that is possibly the best staff in Major League Baseball, and of course they got Cespedes, who's fun to watch, and I picked them to win the National League East. I didn't go as far as picking World Series winner, but I have them winning the East, which isn't going to be an easy feat because the Nationals are going to be pushing them, and so of course you got to stay healthy, and Wheeler is out now for, I don't know how long Wheeler is going to be out for, but hopefully they get Zach up and running and firing on all cylinders, and watch out for those Mets.
Yeah, Wheeler is projected back around the All-Star break, and you never know how these things are going to go. Listen, a year ago, the consensus was the Nationals were a lock to win the National League East.
Absolutely.
we saw what happened, and we just to bring it back to what we were talking about before, 1969, that the Cardinals were a lock to repeat or to win the first National League East. That was the first year they had divisions, and you can find examples throughout baseball history where things don't work out the way you think they will. But just looking at the cards that are on the table now, as a Mets fan, I can't help but be excited. I just wrote something this morning on our blog that this is really, you're always excited about opening day, but this is the first one in about 9 years where I'm like genuinely leaning into the television almost, waiting for the first pitch, because they proved something last year, and at the very least they have held serve in terms of their roster construction for this year, bringing Cespedes back, having these pitchers come along a little more, making a few changes here and there. So, it's something to look forward to. And, at the very least, 30 teams have something to look forward to because they're all tied for first right now, as the old saying goes. But, to have the kind of team where you can feel kind of confident. You don't know what's going to happen. There are no guarantees, but it's a nice feeling. It does start with the pitching, and again, as somebody who grew up with Tom Seaver and John Matlack and Jerry Kuzman, and later came of age in a way with Dwight Gooden and Ron Darling and Sid Fernandez. It really gets to the heart of if Mets baseball stands for anything other than absurdity, it's pitching, and it feels good to watch this staff in action.
So in New York City, so of course you got the Yankees and you got the Mets. And New York City is widely known as the Yankees city. Are the Mets really closing in on that now? I mean, with the Yankees, kind of failing to produce as of late. I mean, they made the playoffs last year. The Mets making it to the World Series. The Mets being a strong favorite this year. Is that starting to turn a little bit?
I think it has. It's interesting. You say, you frame it that way because, again, when I was coming along, at the age of 6 and 7, and then before I was a teenager, this was, as the phrase went, a National League town. I mean, ancestrally, New York is a National League town because we have the Giants and the Dodgers,
right?
Who, their departures for California paved the way for the Mets, and within a couple of years of their existence, the Yankee dynasty of 4 decades had evaporated, and the Mets became the story in town. And then, they just became this phenomenon once they won a World Series in '69, another pennant in '73. And then, you learn that it's kind of cyclical, because then the Yankees had a period of dominance, and the Mets weren't doing anything particularly well. And that turned around again, from the late 70s until about the mid 80s, when the Mets were the toast of the town, and that ran its course into the early 90s. And what happened was the cycle just went longer from about the mid 90s until, honestly, last October. The Mets had some really good years in between. They went to a World Series in 2000. They went to the playoffs in '99 and '06. But they never really sustained a run, whereas the Yankees kept going to the playoffs and won multiple World Series. And then there is no doubt a generation of both Yankee fans and Mets fans who don't necessarily comprehend that it's any other way. But what we saw last October, and I wrote about this a little in my book, Amazin Again, the one that just came out, is, but when you have a team that gets to a World Series in a 2-team city, well, you're still going to have the loyalists who aren't going to be moved no matter what. Much like Mets fans were not moved whatsoever by the Yankees' success, you're just going to have what we'll call the zeitgeist going for you. And you could really feel a shift, and it wasn't subtle, last year toward the Mets. When you pick up the papers, as I did this morning, with all the baseball previews in them, and you see that the Mets get the covers of those special inserts, and they get the prominence with all the stories about the Mets have great pitching, and the Mets have Yoenis Cespedes, and the Mets are going to try to go back to the World Series. Again, it could change, I suppose, if they have an unforeseen lousy year and the Yankees come, if not out of nowhere, then surpass expectations. But right now, I would say things are leaning the National League way in New York, and it's not as, again, maybe from another part of the country, it looks like it's a Yankee city. As a rule, it really isn't. They just had a hell of a run, and I think the Mets are on the precipice of, I wouldn't put a number on it, how many years, but I think that the Mets' time has come, and it's exciting to be around.
So you had brought up your book, Amazin Again, and tell us about it. So it came out last year?
It came out last month, actually.
Okay.
It is the story of how the Mets essentially won the pennant. I think the subtitle is how the 2015 New York Mets brought the magic back to Queens. And it's the story of a team that had been in the doldrums and with relatively few expectations going into 2015, got off to a tremendous start, won 11 in a row at one point, set themselves up for a turnaround season, and then fell into offensive trouble. There were a bunch of injuries. They stopped hitting. Their pitching was keeping them afloat. And there was this sense that, at least they're improving a little, but it's probably for naught. And then there was a period in the middle of the season where they made some moves. Some false starts became some real starts, shall we say. And they were off to the races, surpassing the Nationals in early August. And, again, winning the East, winning a tight series against the Dodgers, sweeping the favored Cubs, and going to the World Series. And the book is written about, much like the blog is, from the perspective of a highly engaged, historically minded fan. So, I make it clear up front in the book, you're not going to get any inside information here. I don't have sources in the clubhouse. I'm not a member of Baseball Writers Association of America or anything, but I am a fan who watches very closely, pays attention, and writes about them every day, practically. So, it's an uplifting story, I think, despite the fact that the Mets could have used a slightly better ending, or I could have used a slightly better ending for the World Series. And it just, it tells what I hope is the first chapter of a long story of Mets success, the chapter known as 2015. And if things don't work out, then it tells you the one great season that they did have. And that's pretty much the book.
Yeah, I was excited about last year. You got the Royals in the series again against the Mets. It's two teams that, the Royals had been there in 14 against the Giants, but, it wasn't your typical Dodgers, Yankees, and whatnot. And you got the upstart Mets who, like I said, I'm excited for the Mets and to watch the Mets this year. And, of course, they beat, the Dodgers there, and then they swept the Cubs, the Cubs, there's no doubt about it, they're as equally talented as well. And so what is the state of baseball there in Queens? How the fans, they're starting to, so you use the term magic, bringing the magic back to Queens.
Well, that is a bit of a throwback some 36 years ago now, when Mets ownership changed and the franchise was at a historical nadir. There was an ad campaign called "Magic is Back," the idea being that the Mets were going to elicit good feelings again. And at first it was sort of taken very sarcastically by the press because the Mets were still this terrible team and nobody showed up at Shea Stadium. And then they ran through this phenomenal spurt of winning lots of last-at-bat games in the middle of the season and getting into, very briefly, into contention circa 1980. And then, of course, they just went back to being bad for a few years. But the point being that magic has sort of or Mets magic has sort of a lineage there. So I think that's one of the reasons I use that word. And again, the feeling of magic, much like the words like miracle and believe and amazing, just tend to follow this team around, in good times and bad, sometimes aspirationally. sometimes in point of fact. I think the magic where the 2015 Mets and perhaps the 2016 Mets are concerned, it deals as much with the reaction of the fans as it does, what the team accomplished on the field, because you went from a very depressed, shall we say, fan base, at least one that felt it had seen all the Mets had to offer and that it wasn't very much, but we stuck with them anyway, to suddenly having season to shout about. And one of the chapters I really enjoyed writing in the book was the phenomenon of going to Citi Field, which again had never really lived up to Shea Stadium in terms of its enthusiasm. Once things got cooking in August, it just became the place to be and the place to shout your lungs out and the place to be excited and the place to chant "Let's go Mets" after the game and on your way out. So again, just that feeling was magical, I think, and it carried well, right up to the beginning of November last year, and we hope it'll pick up as the season gets going.
So before we let you go, let's see if we can get a couple of predictions. So I'm not going to ask you about where the Mets are going to finish, but I would like you to, the Mets to get to the World Series, win a National League championship, and to get to the World Series. What do the Mets, besides staying healthy, what do the Mets need to do this season?
Well, staying healthy really is important.
It's
we'll
big key, definitely.
Given. Yeah, because especially where the third baseman is concerned, because David Wright has been the heart and soul of the Mets for a dozen years, and he's still battling spinal stenosis, which kept him out most of last year. His return was very inspirational, and he certainly contributed some big hits. So, David Wright playing, I don't know if you want to say 100 games, 120 games, is a key. I think, a tight enough defense. Nobody really excels except Juan Lagares, who is at this point kind of a part-time player. But you want to make sure everybody else can kind of do what they're supposed to do. They brought in, a new second baseman and shortstop, and I think that'll help in the long run. I don't think either of those guys is spectacular, but they're both solid and won't make you hold your breath. You mentioned Michael Conforto earlier. I think, I wouldn't want to lean too much on a kid in his first full year, but it will be key, I think, to see that he progresses. Same to a certain extent with Travis d'Arnaud. Same with even the youngish pitchers at this point, Syndergaard and Matz, they'll all have to prove it over a full season. So I don't necessarily think you have to have any quote unquote career years out of people, but just play up to your capability, and don't succumb to the year after syndrome, which often gets teams. And I think all you can ask for as a fan is that your team, wins more than it loses, gives you hope, gets you to August, gets you to September, and hopefully, gets you to the end of September in good stead. And I think this team is poised to do that.
I think you are correct. And like I said, I have the Mets winning the National League East. I think I even went as far as having DeGrom winning the National League Cy Young. And so, man, there's a lot to be excited about there in Queens. The New York Mets seem to be back on track and have a very exciting product out on the field. And, they're even, they're starting to load up in the minor league system as well. So they got some young arms down there as well. And once again, Mr. Greg Prince. Greg, it was a pleasure chatting with you, and let's do this again sometime.
I really appreciate it, Norm. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, once again, Greg Prince, author of Amazin Again, the story of the 2015 New York Mets and how they brought the magic back to Queens. And so, Brian, man, what do you think?
Well, I think it's first day of baseball season, pretty exciting, and I think it's going to be exciting to see what happens. You guys talked about it. Everybody's undefeated right now, so it'll be fun to see a long season, which is half the fun of it.
Opening day. And, I was sharing some stories, opening day stories before we went on, and, man, this is like Christmas for me. It really is. I get so excited about opening day baseball. I know there's only 6 teams playing today. Technically, it's not opening day. Tomorrow's opening day. But man, you got the sun shining out here in Oregon, and it's beautiful outside, and it's time to play some real baseball that counts.
Opening day tomorrow in Oregon, 57 and rainy.
Yes. Yeah. And
Sorry.
Man, so you've been following a little bit about what's going on. So who do you like? So prediction wise, who do you like this year?
I think it's hard to go wrong with picking the Mets. Hard to go wrong with picking the Royals. I have no idea, though. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Royals back and win it all again. They've got some young guys, and they didn't lose a lot. But once again, it's a long season, and a lot of things have to go right, even as defending, champions.
So here's what I got. So National League wise, I have the Mets winning the National League East, with the Nationals finishing second.
Okay.
It all determines on health, obviously. In the National League Central, I think I took the Cubs, and then the Pirates second, and the Cardinals third. But those three teams, they're so interchangeable. It could possibly be those three teams going to the playoffs again. Right. National League West, it's an even year. So you think I'd go with my Giants. No, I went with the Diamondbacks, which I question now because they have lost A.J. Pollock for an extended amount of time.
More importantly, he's on my fantasy team. Thank you very much.
And I still think, as talented as the Dodgers are, and they have Dave Roberts manning the ship, they're headed in the right direction. It's still a clubhouse issue, I think, with those guys, and they're headed in the right direction. So in the West, I had the Diamondbacks followed by the Giants. Giants, I think I had the Giants and the Pirates going to the playoffs. In the American League, this is where it gets tricky because the American League East, holy crud, man. You've got the Yankees, Blue Jays, Red Sox, and the Rays all up for the top spot. I took the Red Sox.
It's a crapshoot there as far as I'm concerned.
I took the Red Sox, and then I think the Rays are going to surprise a few people. The Blue Jays, depending on health and how much they're going to get out of Marcus Stroman, and the Yankees, depends on how their starting pitching comes along. There's no doubt that they can hit the ball. In the American League Central, hey, the Royals are top dogs, defending world champions, so you've got to go off of that. I think the Indians, though, will push them, as will the Tigers. And so it'll be either the Royals or Tigers or Indians for that top spot, possibly one of them for the wild card. American League West, man, it's the Rangers and Astros, but watch out for those Mariners.
There we go.
Robinson Cano is on a mission. And from what I hear, from what I'm hearing up north, what's going on up there is he's going to have a huge, huge season.
What did he call last year then?
It was an okay season. It
wasn't a mission though.
No, it wasn't a mission. So there you have it. I'm not going to make a World Series pick quite yet. Baseball is a grind. 162 games plus. By the time you're done, you're 220 games in. And so those are my favorites. Teams to watch out for. The Mariners and the Mariners in the American League. And National League. Wow. The Nationals. I keep hearing about how good the Nationals are going to be. They're really going to push the New York Mets. And so everybody's been talking about the Nats the last couple of years, and this could be it. I mean, they've got, I think, the second best player in baseball, Bryce Harper. I think Mike Trout is the best. You could argue that all day long. I mean, either or. But I don't think Harper stays healthy. I think somebody's going to take a couple of shots at Harper during the season about some comments that he made during the offseason. And so I don't think Harper's going to stay healthy for the full season. But if he does, watch out. So I'm Norm. That is producer Brian. Hey, we got Dr. Doug Dodds coming on at the 10 o'clock hour. He's going to talk about his beloved Oakland A's, and he's headed to the Grand Cayman Islands to DJ at a country music station in the Grand Caymans. Believe it or not, it's true. So we are sponsored by Baseballisms.com. If you like my hat, it is the childhood cancer hat. You can find it at Baseballisms.com. And we are also sponsored by BaseballDudes.com. To be the best, you must train like the best. Chris Gazelle up there in Vancouver, Washington. Base by Pros, Skipper Mitch Canham of the Clinton Lumber Kings, the Seattle Mariners organization, building an athlete sports education. Base by Pros. His dad, Mark Canham, MDM Designs, does the shirts for Clubhouse Chatter, sweatshirts, hoodies, whatever. If you want one, get in touch with me. I could hook you up. You know, the cost is fairly inexpensive. Also, we stream live every show, yamhilltoday.com. And if you'd like to sponsor the show, get in touch with me, normbo18@gmail.com. We're on Twitter, Clubhouse Chatter 1T, Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, MLB.com blogs, all Clubhouse Chatter. You can find us pretty much anywhere, almost. So we're going to get funky with Dr. Doug coming up in the 10 o'clock hour. I'm Norm. That is producer Brian. We've got Maya, the Wonder Dog, passed out on the floor, and we'll be back.